Okay, so I'm gonna start with the ubbles now. So I think I'm gonna start off with showing the class diagram of the game object as part of this. So the way I have it set up is that game object inherits from the ubbles being updatable, alarmable, drawable, inputable. This also inherits from collidable. It's not listed here, but it also does that. Um, and then all of the user um, defined objects derive from game objects. So ship, for example, derives from game objects, and by deriving from game objects, that allows it to be able to be drawable, updatable, alarmable, etc. Um, so yeah. So just getting an idea of how this all works. Uh, so in ship, I have it set up so that on update, it's going to update the position, and then in the draw stage, it renders the new location of the. Hold on. It renders the new location of the ship. So in order to do that, it first needs to register for its appropriate ubbles. So to be updatable, it has to register to be updatable. To be drawable, it has to register to be drawable. So what this essentially does is within the actual ubble, where is that? Game objects, alarmable, collidable, drawable. We'll start with updatable. So when inside of updatable, the user calls submit registration. What that does is it takes a registration token, which is assigned to each game object. Where is here it is. So it takes my registration token, and then it passes it to the current scene. So here I'm just checking to see, just doing state checking just to make sure I don't double register. That's what all the asserts and stuff are about. So anyways, so I submit registration. What this does is it takes my registration token and it passes it to the current scene through scene attorney. So scene attorney, submit scene command, pull up the attorney, why not? Submit scene command, given the scene and the command, pass that to the scene, call submit scene on the current scene. And then what that will do is it will take my registration command and it will pass it to the command broker located inside of the scene. So this is the command broker and submit scene command. That takes my command that I sent in submit registration and then adds it to the list of commands within the command broker. I can pull that up really quick. So this is my command broker called scene registration because it's primarily used for registration to the scene. So it stores a list of commands and then it adds add command, adds it to the list, and then within execute, it takes the command, it executes it, and then it erases it from the list. So where's scene? So when execute command gets called within update of the scene. So before anything else happens, before updates or drawables or collision checks, the scene checks to see if it has any new registration commands. If it does, it'll get those objects, and then it'll register them to whatever bubble that they chose to register themselves to. So yeah, that happens in update. Just to show you what the updatable registration command looks like. So all it does is it stores a pointer to the game object that's associated with it, and then when execute is called within the command broker, it then calls register on the object that owns the command. So this calls register, and that actually registers it to, where's updatable? So that calls register. From register, that's when it actually registers it to the given manager for that UBL. So this registers an updatable to the updatable manager, meaning that when the updatable manager is processed, it's going to call update on that that registered object. So just to be clear, this goes to the current scene, and then, as I mentioned previously, the scene stores all of the multitins for all of the UBLs. So right here, it's storing the update manager. When register is called, it will then register the given updatable to the updatable manager. So yes, that happens right here. So this calls updatable update register on the update manager. This goes to here, registers it. It's also worth noting that it passes back a reference to the updatable's location within the linked list inside of the updatable manager. It's not a linked list, it's just a STL list. So the reason why I'm sending back a reference is so that I can, when I deregister, I don't have to search through the list. I just have my iterator, and I can just call erase, and this is, I believe this happens in constant time, while store list dot, I don't know, I forgot what the other one is, but there's another one to delete a given object within a list, and it takes linear time. So by passing back a reference, I can go from I can speed up my deregistration. So yeah, so I was talking about I'll register. So that's registering. A given updatable is theoretically registered to the updatable manager to be called when the updatable manager is called within the update of the scene. So then update manager is called. What that'll do is it then calls the update on all of the registered game objects. So this effectively, going back to ship, so since ship is registered to be, let me move this over. So since ship is registered to be updatable, when the scene processes the updatable manager, the updatable iterates through all of the registered updatables, then it calls update on the ship. That will effectively call this update right here. So yeah. So that's updatable manager and updatable in general. I guess I can also go over deregistration. Let me pull that back up again. So deregistration happens very similarly. Let me pull up the ship. So I register when I first create the object, and then when I destroy the object is when I deregister. I submit a command to deregister. Just like registration, I have a deregistration command, which I send to the scene broker, the command broker in the scene, in order to process the actual deregistration. It looks very similar to the registration process. Now going into the CPP. So submit deregistration is called. It submits the command to the scene, to the command broker within scene. That goes to the command broker over here. And then command broker executes the commands, which will then process the deregistration commands. So this is the actual command. What that will then do when it's processed, it'll call deregistration on the assigned updatable object. And then within deregistration, that's when the object will deregister itself from the updatable manager using the delete reference I was talking about previously. So yeah, that's updatable, registration, deregistration, and execution. Drawable looks very similar to updatable. They basically follow the same idea. Where's ship? Here's ship. So just like you submit a registration to be updatable, you also submit registration to be drawable. It goes through the same motions. Submit registration. You send a registration command to the scene. The scene processes that within the command broker. When it's processed, it will call registration. It will call register, which actually registers it to the drawable manager, and then drawable manager will also sorry. Drawable manager will call draw on all of the objects registered to it. So when this is called, that's when the ship is being called. I also integrated my stuff for 2D. I'm going to talk about that later within Drawable. But yeah, I'm going to talk about that later. So yeah, like registration, same thing. I'm passing back a delete reference, so that I can delete in constant time. So that I can delete the object, remove the object from the list in constant time, compared to linear time when deregistering. So yeah, and the actual deregistration process. So I submit my deregistration just like updatable. That passes a deregistration command to the. Let me just pull up my Drawable. So yeah, I got my registration and deregistration commands. So submit deregistration gets called. My deregistration command gets passed to the scene, to the command broker. It's processed. Um, it's then passed to. It's then added to the. Now I'm talking about deregistration. So it's passed. It's passed to the actual Drawable manager, um, and then all that happens is it just erases itself, and then it's deregistered. And yes, I believe that's it. I'll just pull up my attorneys just so that you can see them. So this is Drawable. I also use this attorney for the 2D objects. Um. So yeah. So essentially, what I'm doing is the user can define draw, but the only thing that can call draw is the drawable manager. So that's what I'm doing over here with the draws and the set delete references. The user is not going to call set delete reference. That's specifically for the drawable manager. Registration. Yeah. And then my updatable, same thing. Only my updatable manager can call update and set delete reference. And then my registration stuff, only the commands can call them. So yes, those are two, the drawable and updatable ubles.